House in Baltimore, certainly in our life around here, from incredible fallout of mass shootings at concerts in Las Vegas. And those of you who know me and my wife know we attend such concerts and many, many concerts. And, of course, the backside of trying to find a new sponsor for our Ravens live show. So you could toss me an email on that and read our blog up at WNST.net. I'm still grieving my cat. The Ravens stink right now. And the baseball playoffs are about to begin. And I can't think of the baseball playoffs without thinking about my dad and my childhood and the leaves changing. So I'm sure I will whist very poetic, and my writer's cap and my ball cap will be on this weekend. And when I think of great baseball writers, I think of this guy. He is our friend and Hopkins writer in residence here at Johns Hopkins, but he's also the award-winning author of Castro's Curveball, Red Rain, Summer of '68, and all sorts of other baseball goodies. When the bunting comes out, Tim Wendell, I think of you. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Nestor. That's pretty cool. The bunting comes out. I usually think of the playoffs and all the times I covered them and how many times I froze in the auxiliary press box. But
I was right there with you. I mean, those memories back in Cleveland in the 90s at Yankee Stadium. I mean, baseball in October means gloves, scarf, and something to cover the ears.
Very much so. And digging up the old parka I used to wear out the Candlestick Park back in the days when I first started covering baseball. But we should have taken that bunting and just kind of burned it a little bit. We probably got in trouble for it, but we had warmer for it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. All right, so let's start at the beginning. First off, you can follow Tim at Tim_Wendell. That's Wendel. Of course, longtime USA Today and USA Baseball Weekly, and author of many, many baseball books. Before I get to baseball, because you're a writer and you're a man of poetry and putting things into words, I think a lot of us awakened on Tuesday or went to bed on Monday night after the death of Tom Petty. And look, we've been through this with Prince. We've been through this with Glenn Frey. Those of us who are old enough remember Elvis, right? And John Lennon. But I think in the modern era where we had Walter Becker leave us a couple of weeks ago. Those of us that like pop music, I heard a George Michael song this weekend, and I'm like, I can't believe he's gone. That we're now getting into that era when guys who died that are 66-year-old musicians who had all sorts of drug, alcohol, tobacco, you name it, living on the road, hard life of rock and roll. All the stuff that Tom Petty wrote a lot about. So you want to be a rock and roll star, and leaves us too soon. But the outpouring of love for musicians when they die, I think it's different than when Mickey Mantle dies, or it's different than when a politician dies, or it's different than even when an actor dies, right? I mean, I think all of them leave us something, and we have memories. But I think music is this incredible, eternal thing, because I saw Tom Petty play 4 times in the last 4 months. I went out to Denver. I was 50 feet away from him with 50,000 other people screaming, yelling. There's something different about musicians dying, and this Petty death has sort of brought that home for me, different than anybody else who's a celebrity.
Yeah, very much so. And I feel your pain. That's right. In fact, I was playing Tom Petty this morning, and I had not seen him as much as you had, but my first gig really out of college, and we've talked about this a little bit before, I was the rock and roll critic in Buffalo. And you'd talk with these guys as they would come through and go to their concerts, and it hits us in a different place. Maybe it hits us deeper or whatever. And I was a big Petty fan. And I loved the fact that he was somehow, despite all the success and all the notoriety, he was still one of us. He was still like the guy who was out there, cheering on the underdog, still the kid with the chip on his shoulder who somehow came from Hicksville, Florida, and ends up hanging out with, touring with Bob Dylan and being a good friend of George Harrison's, et cetera, et cetera. And I found myself this morning also pulling down, if people don't know it, the biography by Warren Zane, just called Petty. It's great. And I found myself leafing through it again and just going, wow, this guy lived quite a life, and yet he gave us so much back. And, maybe that's where it's different than a ball player or even an actor is, later today I'll be in the car. I bet you I'll be playing some Tom Petty.
Well, you know what? I wrote about it today, and I said in the modern era, we mourn our musical icons far more than actors or athletes or other pop culture sorts. I'm thinking it's because what they do is portable, available, recurring, and incredibly personal. When you're home alone, and I have been, and certainly the death of my cat has made our home just incredibly quiet. Silently making noise, as Jimmy Buffett once wrote she did. But you could put a Tom Petty song on, or put a DVD on, or let's get to the point, roll another joint, let's roll on that. And you listen to music, or you can put American Girl on or listen to Her Heart or whatever, and all of a sudden you're not alone anymore. Music is this incredible companion that we stick in our ears, and it's there whenever we call upon it, in a way that a movie or a Willie Mays catch or even a book that takes more time and more thought and is more direct. Music goes with us. We can do other things while we have music, kind of like I do with Orioles games on summer nights. But the music really does. We know it. We learn it. We learn the words. We repeat it. There's something mantra-esque about it. And then there's all the touch points of that special girl we kissed, or that special time we had with our friends, or that special night somewhere at Merriweather Post, or that night at the prom, or whatever that thing is. Music is a different kind of thing than I think anything else that has affected my life, and I'll be 49 next week, Tim.
Wow, you're getting on there.
I'm close. Yeah, I'm catching up to you, bro. I am. Finally.
You're catching up. You're in the fast lane, catching up to you. But I hear you. It's soothing. It's reassuring, and it's funny how humanity just kind of clasps on to certain things. I mean, 100 years ago, before we had all these electronics and such, poetry, was much more important. People quoted poetry. People knew poetry.
They read it every night. They memorized it.
They read it every night,
sure.
and they would have it and would serve kind of the same function.
Of inspiring and educating, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's music. I know if I'm in a certain mood and I got to kickstart my way out of it, okay, I'll probably put on, I don't know, something like Jay Giles Band live in Detroit, and no more slipping and dogging around, and away we go. And I'm off into the day if I need to do it. If I need to be more reflective, man, I'm putting on something like, Tom Petty's Wildflowers or something like that. And we can, what I think makes art or these things that we need really important, Nestor, is we can come back to it in certain frames of mind, certain moods, and it speaks to us in certain ways. I mean, that's the mark of something that's very valuable to us in some ways. That's the mark of a great artist, and I believe Tom Petty was.
All right, as a great radio artist, Tim, I'm going to attempt to segue from the great art of modern music to the romance of baseball, which you have written about many, many times. The leaves are changing. The bunting is out. Some of the rules are a little different, and certainly all the cast of characters have changed, but October is when the magic happens for those of us who have spent the rest of our lives when we weren't listening to Tom Petty or Rush or Bruce Springsteen or whatever. We were watching baseball. Those of us who love baseball and grew up with baseball and have dedicated much of our lives to it. The Orioles are on the outside looking in, and I'll save them for last, just like they're standing in the American League East. So we'll talk about the Orioles last here. But this tournament, some thoughts about this, and some new players, some new people. Certainly lots of broken hearts here, right? From Cleveland and the Dodgers and what the Nationals have represented. The Astros have never won. Meanwhile, the Yankees and the Red Sox and some of the Dodgers, some of the usual suspects are involved in this. But this is a pretty good tournament, and I don't know that there's really a favorite. You'd say, well, Cleveland's been the best team lately. But, that's what October's all about. And this weekend specifically in these shorter series where the bullpens get after it, where the wild card teams are depleted to some degree from the 9 innings they had to play, the other teams didn't have to play, it really creates, by Saturday or Sunday, teams that thought they won 102 games find themselves down 0-2 and say, what the hell happened? Because you can get freight trained out of this tournament pretty quickly this week.
Oh, very much so. I mean, it can be over in blink of an eye. And you were just saying, I don't think there's any favorite, and I tend to agree. I mean, you could say Cleveland, maybe you could say the Dodgers, but, we're talking about how fast things can turn around. I was looking at some numbers, just yesterday. Cleveland was like a 500 team, roughly till about mid-season, and then just took off, with the winning streak, et cetera. They won, twice won doubleheaders, 2 doubleheaders they've swept in 3 days. And then you got the Dodgers, who seemed like, okay, they're the heir apparent. They're the favorite. They won 56-11 at one point, and then turned around and went in that dreadful streak where they won 1 game in 17. So, you can always say in any postseason a team that gets hot, but I think it's really the case this year because there's the two maybe favorites from either side. Both have been tremendously hot at times, and both have been kind of very mediocre at times, too. So it's going to be, I think, very, very interesting. I love the short series, and I love the fact that some of these teams, in just a matter of days, can suddenly be on the outside looking in and ousted. And when I, would cover postseason, that was the series I always enjoyed the most. And, we had some times up in Cleveland with Cleveland and the Yankees and all that type of stuff. And well,
remember how quick that Seattle team went out after being so good, right?
Yeah, I mean, 106 wins or something? You're just going, wow, and there they go. And all these teams, I think, have great strengths, but it's really kind of covering up perhaps some real liabilities. And it starts, in a sense with Twins, Yankees, both teams I'm kind of intrigued by. The Twins I kind of like in large part because they're finally back in the spotlight really after, 1991. I did a book on that, Down to the Last Pitch, and here you got a team that lost 100 games last year that suddenly has the potential to end up, moving on to the ALCS. And the Yankees, I didn't think they would be back this quickly, yet here they are with a bullpen that, boy, you talk about a short series, you talk about a single game, their starter could blow up in like the first, second, third inning, and oh, that's fine. Let's just start rolling out all these arms we've got in the bullpen. So all these teams I find very, very intriguing, and I think you just underscored something too. They all, at least a lot of them, come to the postseason with some mental baggage. What are going to be the teams that are going to be able to chase away those ghosts, that are really going to be able to come to terms with their past? Because you've got a number of teams here that are really kind of, at least mentally, dead man walking.
Well, the Dodgers and the Nationals have been, the most disappointing teams in postseason in recent years. Obviously the Red Sox are there, and I think for the Red Sox, the expectations are low. When I talk to people in Boston, they didn't think much of this team, maybe as much as they did in the offseason. This reemergence of Price in sort of a different way. We'll see. I still think the Red Sox are a very, very scary team.
I agree.
I think they'll still be playing 2 weeks from now. I'm just not going to put a dollar on the Astros right now to beat the Red Sox.
No, I wouldn't. And I think in a lot of ways the Red Sox are arguably the most talented team out there. They're beat up. Pedroia's knee. This new role with Price. I tend to be a David Price fan, except when he picks on my buddy Dennis Eckersley. And it's going to be interesting to see for sale. How much does he have in the tank after this really interesting season? But the Red Sox, it's funny. John Gibbons, the Blue Jays manager, a friend of mine was speaking to him earlier in the season, and he just kind of gave a nod, and they were playing the Red Sox. He just said, that team is scary. They are scary good. And I think they're beat down right now, and frankly, that the populace of Boston doesn't expect much could really work in their favor.
Well, the fans got down on them, right, on the Eckersley thing. You talk about, and I've talked about this all week, fans here hating on the Ravens and me having to find a new home for my radio shows because of that. Up in Boston, the Eckersley thing really sort of divided part of the fan base and would divide me. If I'm on the outside of that and reading what I read and hearing what I heard from people who had high integrity accounts of that, it makes you not like the Boston Red Sox or this version of the Boston Red Sox, right?
I agree, and I'm a big Eckersley fan. I covered Eckersley when he was making the transition from starter to closer very, very reluctantly for Tony La Russa in Oakland. That's one of the first teams I cut my teeth on. But it's this us versus them mentality can be very powerful, as we know, Nestor. And I think I agree with you. When I first saw that play out, and I've covered both of those individuals. David Price is kind of a minor character in my book, High Heat, where I went in search of the fastest pitcher of all time. And so I've enjoyed my time with both of them, even though I tend to lean much more towards Eckersley. But it seems to have united the Red Sox to a certain degree, this us versus them mentality. And of all people to, go against Eckersley, but somehow that unites your team, I find a little bit mind-boggling. But that's professional sports these days. I can't figure a lot of it out.
He is Tim Wendell. He is the longtime baseball writer at USA Today and Baseball Weekly, and author, and now an award-winning author of Castro's Curveball, Red Rain, Summer '68. But he's here in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins as a writer in residence. What are you working on right now? I know you've been doing a whole bunch of cancer stuff and stuff outside of the toy department, as we would say with baseball, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting. That's and thanks to your wife for really giving me some insight on the cancer book. Cancer Crossings, a brother, his doctors, and the quest to cure childhood leukemia will be out by next opening day. In fact, we just signed off on the cover today. I've got to send you that.
Well, you better hurry, by the way, because they moved opening day up like a week and a half now. Your book was due in April. Now it's due in March. I don't know if you know that or not.
Oh, well, we'll make it good. But we'll be fine. So actually, it's been intriguing doing that. And it's funny, we're just talking poetry a little bit. One of the doctors that is profiled in that book, these are very elite team of doctors, underdogs who cured childhood leukemia, pretty much, dreamed up an accelerated chemotherapy, et cetera.
And helped save my wife's life 30 years later, right?
Yeah, unbelievable legacy that these guys have. And one of them was raised learning to recite poetry. And I somehow heard this. And one time when I was speaking with him, his name's Dr. James Holland, still 91 years old, still works 3 days a week at Mount Sinai in New York. Bless his heart. And we got talking about things. I just said, so I hear you can recite poetry. And he got a little miffed at me, saying, where'd you hear that? I said, well, friends, whatever. And I said, all right. And all of a sudden he launched into this beautiful poem that I went and looked up later. And he had this, resounding, deep baritone voice. And it was kind of like what we do when we listen to Tom Petty or Bruce Springsteen or something like that. I just sat there and I was in the moment. And it felt like you were the greatness of the words and how they could mean so much. And, that's what people did 100 years ago. And every now and then it can flash back to us now.
You can follow Tim Wendell at Tim_Wendell. That's WENDEL out on Twitter, and check his books out on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. All right, a big picture here. We do have a local interest in the Major League playoffs. I mean, the Washington Nationals are the other team here. People in Baltimore don't want to hear that, but it certainly funds and lines the pockets of Peter Giangelos and Shal in this offseason. There's a lot at stake for Masson and for the Orioles if the Nationals were to win the World Series, although no one in Baltimore would want to hear that. But certainly the Orioles have their work cut out for them moving forward. And as I've pointed out, they are the last place Baltimore Orioles, and that's what they shall be into eternity for 2017. They earned that. They stunk this year.
Yeah, they certainly stunk down the stretch. And it's funny, I think the last time you and I spoke was it was pretty soon after the trading deadline, and they hadn't done much. If anything, it was confusing on were they a buyer or a seller or what's the game plan here. And then they went on a hot streak, and all of a sudden everything seemed to be forgiven. And then within, a week or so, the complete bottom of that team fell out. I'm bamboozled where they go from this point on. And seeing like Machado's, last game and not really running things out, I don't know. And the problem, maybe the bigger overall problem they have, and we've alluded to it a little bit with the Red Sox and the Yankees, is this division got good, really good, again in a hurry. And I would hate to be without a game plan as they seem to be and being in this division, because it's not going to be forgiving anymore.
Without a game plan. That's a hell of a charge to bring against the franchise, but, that's what I would say about it. I mean, that's the ultimate insult, right? You guys don't even have a plan. You don't know what the hell you're doing. And quite frankly, the blind squirrel found the nut. I mean, they were in the ALCS a couple years ago. They had a legitimate chance to win a World Series because of Machado and Jones and the deftness of the trades of Andy McPhail. None of that's going on right now. This signing of Chris Davis, who was, quite frankly, statistically one of the worst players on their team this year that they gave at-bats to, and that's saying something because they gave 25 starts to a guy with a 7 ERA and 29 starts to a guy with a 6 ERA. And now, the offseason, talking about Wade Miley or bringing back Chris Tillman, I mean, just the notion that you're going to bring back a guy with a 7 ERA says to me that you're white flagging before you even begin. If that's how high your bar is, you need a higher bar. And that, quite frankly, one of the problems around here has been the bar hasn't been very high.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And I think it's it's unfortunate because if that's how high your bar is, it's not going to work in this division because this division got, as I said, really good again. And if you're in a division that suddenly is getting very competitive, now putting two teams in the postseason, etc. Again, I go back to the plan. And what's the plan? Is it pitching, defense? Is it, okay, we're just going to be Bash Brothers reincarnated and try to get the ball out of the park? I don't know when I look at this team. I don't know when I watch them because they seem to be one team one night, another team the next night. And I feel, you and I disagree on Buck Showalter. I still tend to be a Buck guy.
I don't disagree. I don't think he's not the right guy. I just don't think he's not going to stay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My issue is when you go lame duck into a year, right. and look, Buck gets on the plane, goes back down to Dallas, and he spends nights with his wife, and I don't know what he's thinking at midnight, but I know what he's got to be thinking. I can't win with it like this. It wasn't my fault we didn't win this year. We didn't have enough talent. We didn't have the horses, and I think he knows next year that the likelihood of them having the horses to really do this is. He's smarter than you and I are. We've kind of figured this out. That it looks like they're a long way away, Tim.
Yeah. How many more years does he have?
One. No, he's got one. Duquette has one. Jones has one. Britton has one. Brock has one. And Machado has one. The big six, those are the six guys, they're all tied to this week next year. That's all they have left, all of them.
They're going to be bringing you in pretty soon.
Well, I would have a plan. They might not like the plan. My plan would be to eliminate the owner and his sons. That would be my plan. My plan would be to get somebody like Larry Lucchino on speed dial. That would be more my plan,
Yeah,
so.
Bring back Larry. That would be interesting. But, it's funny because I watch them, and like we were just saying, I don't know, certain teams you can see that they're lousy now. You can even say that about the Twins last year, for example, and say, well, wow, this team stinks. Yeah, you got Mulder, you got some young kids coming. I mean, they certainly had some breaks and some pitching came through. I can see a direction. I have a tough time seeing a direction with the Orioles, and that really pains me because I love coming up to games there. I mean, that's still arguably my favorite stadium, et cetera. And I think it's really unfortunate. And you bring up the whole Masson factor, which is going to be perhaps very intense, especially if the Nationals are able to get over, actually win a playoff series and suddenly become, a much more bona fide team.
Well, I think the other part of this is when that check has to get written, whenever it gets written. I mean, the Nationals have been getting screwed out of tens of millions of dollars for about a dozen years now. If that check ever comes due, that is the Machado check, right? That is Angelos' way of saying, well, we're a small market team, they're screwing us again. This whole notion of whether they would have the money to sign Machado or not is foolish. They have the money. It's just whether they want to allocate those resources. And quite frankly, I don't think that kid wants to play here. That kid is wearing Mr. Miami on the back of his shirt.
Sure.
I mean, that kid's not going to be here no matter what, and he's going to leave them holding the bag no matter what, and they would be best served to deal him in the offseason. But they, quite frankly, don't have the stones to do that. They've never had the stones to do that.
Well, ideally, they should have dealt him in the last trading deadline, because I tend to agree. I think he's going to use the Orioles potentially as a bargaining chip and end up someplace else. So it's, Miami, Florida, whatever it may be. And so I don't know. Again, we're back to a very curious situation. And I don't know. I've got a question for you, Nestor. If there's a huge buyout or payout with Masson, say from the Orioles' point of view, does Angelo still keep this team? Is he going to keep this team forever?
He's never sold anything, kind of famously.
Yeah.
I mean, I've written at length. No one has been more biopic of his of who he is. No one has researched it more. No one's written about it more. Everyone tells me he's never sold anything. He's a miser, and he is absolutely a collector of things, right? I mean, he's never relinquished anything he's ever had control of, including his own law firm at 88 years of age. So, and he's got his good-looking boys. If his good-looking boys were going to be running the place, they'd have been running it a long time ago, right?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know.
Crazy off-season, man, but at least we got baseball all weekend, right? Real baseball, not drama like 9 innings in, 4 different places all weekend long. This is who's going to win? Who's going to have the parade at the end of the month, Tim?
Oh, boy. This is tough. I'm I'm a big backer of Cleveland, even though I'm wondering, did they peak too soon? I mean, just seeing how worked up they got over the winning streak and everything, you kind of going, boy, it'd be good to save a little bit of that. But Francona, I think, is a great manager, and their starting pitching is really good. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down to Yankees with their great bullpen versus Cleveland in the AL. And I don't know. I want to say Nationals on the NL, but I feel like I've been burned so many times that I'm probably going to say Dodgers. Even though I caught the Rockies the other night, Nestor, and I haven't seen a lot of the Rockies. I kind of dug them. They had some good things going on.
Arenado's okay, yeah. I mean, there's excitement throughout this tournament, even for the teams that are going to lose this week.
Yeah, and then certainly they can, head held high and moving ahead. I mean, you look at even a one-game playoff like Twins versus Yankees. Obviously, the Yankees should win, seeing it's being at home. But even if they lose, they got a lot to look forward to next year. Twins certainly do. I mean, almost all these teams, you go, wow. I mean, the future looks bright. So I'm going Dodgers, Cleveland, World Series. I think Cleveland wins it. So that's where I'm at right now.
Wow, another Cleveland parade. The world's not ready. I will know the apocalypse is upon us if Cleveland has parades in 2 consecutive years.
It's all over. All we're going to have to do is, if that happens, we got to put on some Tom Petty records and just kind of sit back and take inventory.
What's going to happen next? Drew Carey on The Price is Right? Who knows for Cleveland. Hey, great having you on, Tim. We'll look forward to your cancer book coming out in the spring. We're all going to be following you at Tim_Wendell. That's WENDEL. Our favorite writer in residence at Johns Hopkins. And when you relinquish that title, let them know I am available and just 3 miles away.
You got it.
Tim Wendell joining us here live from the Johns Hopkins campus. You can find me out at thebuyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. If you got any thoughts on rock and roll and Tom Petty, I will gladly take that as well. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. If there's any breaking news this week on the Ravens, injuries, Brandon Williams, good stuff, bad stuff, certainly E.J. Manuel starting for the Raiders is good stuff if you're a Ravens fan, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. There is never spam. We're pretty good at that. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.